One local driver that I spoke with today said he hasn't noticed the shortage, but he has noticed a change in the way that drivers are treated. It covered this part of the sign that says nature area, and so the only thing that you could see is the word forum. In March of 2019, MU Health reported 48 emergency psychiatric visits for children experiencing suicidal thoughts. Now in March of this year, they hit a high for the past 3 years, hitting 62 emergency room visits. Noah, today I went to Sam's Club, Hy-Vee, Walmart, looking for these self-testing COVID-19 kits, but I really haven't had any luck. Ernest Johnson's lawyers made a last-minute appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States to grant clemency to Johnson this morning. And JC Vote is going to be here until 7 o'clock tonight if you want to come out and get registered, or if you just want some free barbecue and free music to listen to. So I did bring my pickleboard paddle.
Look at you.
Nobody's here to play with me. The string of lights I have here has 100 bulbs. Now the house behind me is lit by 500,000 bulbs. What's really cool about this house is they have their entire backyard decorated. So we've got Santa in a sleigh back here, we've got a blown up minion over here. We're just a week away from Thanksgiving, and if you haven't bought a turkey yet, it could be harder to find one. Yeah, they told me that they had to put a sign up outside of the bubbles because people would just keep coming up and being like, what's going on? Like, what is happening? And
Why
like,
are you
we're
in
just
there?
trying to eat.
Please, we're eating here.
I don't know about you, but when I think of copper, I immediately think of pennies. That's because many people don't consider the levels of copper in their bodies. The researcher I spoke with told me that copper could help in preventing cancer.
And we're starting to see cure.
MU researcher Michael Petrus says cancer cells need copper in order to grow and spread. His research shows withholding copper can cause changes in the body.
That blocks the growth of cancer cells in mice models.
Petrus and his colleagues have discovered a molecule that can block copper in food from going into the body. This molecule wouldn't replace chemotherapy. Instead, Petrus says it would keep cancer cells from returning.
This is sort of almost a preventative, if you will, after having cancer.
Petrus says there aren't many solutions to prevent recurring cancer, which can be a large concern for many patients.
Then it's like, oh crap, when is this going to return? Is it going to return? You know, that's the waiting game that's just horrible.
The grant money will help Petrus improve the molecule until it's fit for human clinical trials.
I think it holds a lot of promise.
Petrus says this research is the most exciting science he's done in his career.
But to go from discovery to producing something that people could use potentially is really exciting for me.
Petrus says initial cancer tumors are typically easy to remove, but it's the tumors that spread that can be deadly. He says this molecule would block those spreading tumors, meaning it could lengthen people's lives.
In this week's edition of A Brighter Tomorrow, KMU8's Liza Mahacek shares the story of an advocate working to prevent adolescent suicide.
Are going to make their intention known.
Beth Eichen knows about the warning signs of suicide. She says a main indication of suicidal thoughts is giving away prized possessions.
To me, that also includes giving away your interests.
Beth says she realized there was a problem when her son, Stuart, lost his love for football.
I mean, he loved football, loved the game of football, and ate, slept, and drank it.
When she finally got Stuart to go to therapy, she thought everything would be fine.
And little did I realize just how deep it goes.
In 2009, 17-year-old Stuart died by suicide.
It was very sad and devastating.
The Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services shows suicide as the second leading cause of death for Missourians aged 10 to 24 years old. And while numbers are rising across the country, Dr. Arpit Agarwal says MU Health is seeing a variation.
If you look at the nationwide trend, yes, there have been a definite increase. But as we looked into these numbers that were shared with us, so these numbers have been all over the place.
Agarwal says the data shows a seasonal pattern determined by the school schedule. When kids are out of classes, there's usually a dip in psychiatric visits.
And when it's holiday season, the numbers generally tend to go down.
In March of 2019, MU Health reported 48 emergency psychiatric visits for children experiencing suicidal thoughts. Now, in March of this year, they hit a high for the past 3 years, hitting 62 emergency room visits. Experts say this comes from focusing on staying physically healthy amid the pandemic, but not working to stay mentally healthy.
It's easier to ignore it when we have on the face value like much bigger problem like physical health problems. So during the peak last year and all of the time, people just were so worried about getting COVID.
Because of everything settling down, that they're actually able to feel those big feelings.
Counselor Kevin Williams says higher depression rates may stem from feeling isolated during the pandemic, but it leads to kids further isolating themselves.
You're going to want to isolate. You're going to want to withdraw. You're not going to want to socialize.
Beth saw this happen with her son, spending hours alone in his room. But even with the warning signs, Stuart's passing was not expected.
I always pictured Stuart as, this beacon of life, this rock that couldn't be shaken. And so whenever he passed away, it was definitely a shock.
Now, Beth is an advocate for suicide prevention. She carries on her son's legacy with the Stuart Eichen Foundation. If Stuart were here today, Beth imagines he'd also be helping kids facing a similar situation.
I can almost picture him being a counselor or a behavioral health specialist, wanting to, help people, help youth.
Making sure every person knows they're not alone. For QMU8 Cares A Brighter Tomorrow, Liza Mahacek, Columbia. Well, Jordan, David Nail is a well-known country singer-songwriter, and he's on his way to Columbia right now for his performance tonight. His newest album has something that pertains to many people in our state, Missouri Pride. She got the blue jeans painted on tight, and everybody wants on the side. David Nail grew up in Kennett, Missouri.
I'm very proud to have grown up there.
But Columbia is another feeling of home.
Blue Note was one of those places that I grew up, I was such a fan. I would read people's tour, get on their websites and read where they played.
He says his favorite memory of performing in Missouri is right here in Columbia.
It would be one of the Blue Note shows.
Nail and his band have performed in large venues and football stadiums, but he says there's something special about the Blue Note.
They love it. They love going to Booch's and getting cheeseburgers. They love walking downtown. So I think kind of seeing them objectively fall in love with it, it's made me kind of love it even more, even though it's kind of like my home state place.
Nail's latest album, called The Boot Heel 2021, surrounds his love for his home state.
It's just a collection of songs about where I grew up and how I grew up.
And friends say you'd never know that Nail is a Grammy-nominated artist with 2 #1 singles.
He is such a down-to-earth Missouri guy.
And they say his love for Missouri isn't a secret.
I've seen his videos on Instagram where when he's headed this direction, he describes it as being like a kid at Christmas.
I always tell people, they're never going to meet anybody that's more proud to be where they're from, be more proud to be from Missouri than I am.
Nail says it's so often that even his 5-year-old daughter has caught on.
No daddy is more proud to be from Missouri than my daddy.
And although he's lived near Nashville for almost half of his life, he always says he's from Missouri.
I always say it feels like I'm cheating on my wife if I tell somebody I'm not from Missouri, because I just feel like that I have this ridiculous amount of pride about that.
David Nail, a name known across the U.S., and the name of a man who is proudly Missouri made.